This couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, our greatest allies have been the Black community. Black and Asian solidarity has a long, long history. And that's not to erase the examples from both sides of intolerance, hate, and violence. But at our best, we have long fought alongside each other, such as Frederick Douglass advocating for Chinese and Japanese immigration in 1869.
Hello guys, welcome once again to AfriPost. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great time. Now, I came across a video here of an Asian woman talking about how they're standing up with black people because for many times whites have taken advantage of blacks and they have not appreciated the kind of sufferings that blacks went through throughout their lives. The video is quite interesting because it really talks about how most white people are coming to the comment section of black creators and ranting and giving out their rage in those kind of situations. So I want us to watch this clip of this Asian lady speaking and really showing her support and her people's support for black people in the black fatigue and the black sufferings that they have gone through. And then we are going to watch reactions that she got and other creators gave in relation to this topic. So let's watch this, then come back and share our thoughts in the end.
White people attempting to rebrand white rage by co-opting the term black fatigue as though it's a phenomenon they actually experienced but only recently found the language to talk about is both dystopianly weird and tragically on brand. The copying, the whitewashing, the centering themselves by playing victim. But what's ironically telling about it is that the concept of racial battle fatigue is not new. It's been around for decades. And the term black fatigue has been used by black people for quite a while. Mary Frances Winters wrote a book that came out in 2020 titled Black Fatigue, and it describes the mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion that black people experience because of systemic racism. Now, notice how black people didn't call that white fatigue, because the purpose is not to assign blame in order to justify bad behavior. It is called black fatigue because it is a harm that black people experience, and so their focus is on addressing and combating that harm. Whereas when white people talk about experiencing black fatigue, they are not talking about a harm that they experience because of black people or anybody else. They are literally telling on their own inability to live in society with black people. And that's not new either. That's a pathology that has existed for hundreds of years, but call it what it is, white rage.
This couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, our greatest allies have been the Black community. Black and Asian solidarity has a long, long history. And that's not to erase the examples from both sides of intolerance, hate, and violence. But at our best, we have long fought alongside each other, such as Frederick Douglass advocating for Chinese and Japanese immigration in 1869. Or when Henry Turner and Ida B. Wells spoke out on behalf of Filipino freedom fighters. Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, and many black protesters condemning the violence and war in Vietnam. Japanese Americans fighting alongside the black community to repeal the Emergency Detention Act. The powerful relationship between Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X. Grace Lee Boggs and her husband James Boggs. Jesse Jackson, the NAACP for Vincent Chin. And the majority of Asian Americans who support the Black Lives Matter movement.
Neocolonialism is a development of capitalism where capitalist powers, both countries and corporations, dominate a subject nation through the operations of international capitalism rather than by direct rule. And the African nations that borrow from China prefer China as a lender to Western nations exactly because China does not engage in neocolonialism. China has no interest in controlling the policy of the African nations that borrow from it. And that's best summed up by the Kenyan official who said, every time China visits, we get a hospital, whereas every time Britain visits, we get a lecture. Now, that is grossly oversimplifying the issue. There are reasons to be concerned about China's presence in these African nations, such as the impact on the environment, the impact on local residents, and whether these Chinese organizations are providing the job and business opportunities to local citizens so that they're setting these nations up for long-term self-sufficiency and not just constant debt. Nevertheless, no Asian leader has ever gone anywhere in Africa, declared themselves king and owner of all of the local residents, and then enacted such a horrific authoritarian regime that it resulted in reducing the local population by half. China is not sponsoring coups or assassination attempts against democratically elected African leaders, and China is not even conditioning its lending upon the ability to control policy of these African nations. And really, all I need to do to prove both your statements wrong is to point to the 15 Asian and African member and partner nations to BRICS. Now, feel however you might about BRICS, nations that are colonizing other nations do not invite the nations that they are colonizing to a seat at the table of power. And those are 15 Asian and African nations that are seeking an alternative to Western-dominated geopolitical order. Now, if we use our critical thinking skills, it should go without saying that Asians in Asia do not talk as much about white supremacy as Asian Americans, because Asians who live in Asia are not living in a white supremacist society. But there are hardly any Asian countries who are happy about their histories with Western colonialism and continued interference. Western imperialists go to China, China winds up with the First and Second Opium Wars. Chinese come to the United States, and the United States gets its railroads built. White GIs go to Asia, Asian countries wind up with a horribly abusive and exploitative sex tourism problem. Black GIs go to Asia, and we wind up with amazing music and food. Oh, and by the way, migrant and immigrant mean two different things, and while a person certainly can be both, the words are not interchangeable.
Black fatigue is when I can hear you 10 miles away in Walmart with your 5 fucking kids.
Yeah, because poor white people who live in rural parts of the United States are famously respectful and quiet when they walk up in Walmart with the 5 kids that they had with their second cousin.
Black fatigue is when you have no home training and you have no idea how to act in public.
In my high school, I saw 2 white pregnant 15-year-olds fist fight each other in the lunchroom, wearing Cookie Monster pajamas.
And a lot of it is culture. I've been in the hood. I've been in the fucking schools and the projects where I was the only white girl there.
Quick question. When you were at that school, did you read in a history book about how your grandmother was denied the right to vote and how your ancestors were brutalized and enslaved and eaten by their slave owners?
And I can 100% guarantee you that it's culture. When majority of y'all know someone who has been unalived by another black person.
Hey, so before you made this, did you look at the demographic statistics of school and, people who their entire family in cold blood?
Way more than any instance of a black person being unjustifiably unalived by the police. That's black fatigue.
All of you literally think every unarmed black person who was unalived by the police is completely justified. Breonna Taylor committed the crime of sleeping in her bed. Trayvon Martin was reaching for Skittles, and Ahmaud Arbery was going for a jog. All right?
As well as donating to Carmelo Anthony and Rodney Hinton Jr.
If I watched a police officer end my child's life in front of me and I was in a car, I'd run them over and you'd probably call me a hero. And I seem to remember another teenager who was carrying a weapon, warned people not to come near him. People without weapons came near him and then he used that weapon and ended their lives. His name was Kyle Rittenhouse. And y'all stand him to this day. If the kid who stabbed Austin Metcalf deserves to go to jail, then so does Kyle Rittenhouse.
When you aren't able to hold your own community accountable, that's a problem.
There is a Klan museum in the middle of downtown Kennesaw, Georgia. And when the white supremacist owner of it, Dent Myers, passed away, the Kennesaw government held it up to a vote on whether or not it stayed open, and the entire city of Kennesaw showed up in droves to make sure that that Klan museum stayed open. And you wonder why minorities feel unsafe in this country. We literally have no right to tell people how to hold their own accountable.
That's a problem. We're not going to sit here and act like this is new now, because now white people are speaking out.
I can't believe that y'all just spent the last 10 years telling everybody that Democrats were the real racists.
Especially when we've been told for so long to feel sorry for our whiteness.
No one wants you to feel sorry for your whiteness. There are still black Americans alive today who remember not being able to drink from the same water fountains and not getting a quality education and being shunned from being able to build wealth in this country. And before Cory Booker broke the record for the longest filibuster, it was previously held by a white supremacist segregationist who was trying to stop the Civil Rights Act. And you think that because the history book acknowledges that very real fact that you're being made to feel guilty about your race? No.
And that we have white tea privilege, whatever the fuck that means.
People with non-white names are statistically less likely to get hired for jobs. And back when Donald Trump was busy building his real estate empire instead of ruining my country, he was found liable for denying non-white tenants.
For something no white person alive today did.
Yeah, maybe the white people alive today didn't do it, but the flags that were flown by the people who did it are still being flown at full mast off the bed of every lifted Ford F-150 this side of the Mississippi, right next to the Blue Lives Matter sticker and the Trump flag.
And no black person alive today has experienced. There is no way that y'all thought that we would be quiet for this long.
Enlighten me. At what point in the last 20 years has the racism on the right been anything except loud, obnoxious, and disgusting?
No, having us on our knees, kissing BLM's feet, still begging for the reparations that you are not fucking owed because you did not go through what your ancestors went through.
When generation after generation, a certain race of people are systematically barred from climbing the social ladder of the country that they live in, it's gonna have a generational ripple effect.
Nobody cared about race until you started blaming white people for all of your current problems.
Hey, White here. Racial segregation, caring that your skin is a certain color, that was us. We came up with that. That's an us thing.
We're just done tolerating it.
When this pseudo-edgelord psyop that we're calling the MAGA movement runs its course, and all of you are done having your little hissy fits because you feel just a little bit more comfortable finally being open about your racism, I hope this video and videos like these follow all of you to every job interview you ever go to. And I hope that you're in an unemployment line for the rest of your existence.
So you went with 1350. Cute. Those are arrests, not convictions. Arrest. Math is hard for white supremacists, and I understand that. I get it. It's hard. I wouldn't want to do it either if I didn't know how. But while you're doing this, while you are over here making this bullshit ass 1356 or 58 or whatever the fuck number, I want to show you something from your own fucking page. Hold on. This is a picture from your page. You see that name right there? That's a convicted felon. That is a convicted felon. A state in the union convicted him of crimes. That man has more felonies than I do. I'm not talking about arrests, I'm talking about convictions. In the court of law, I have no felonies whatsoever. None. Not a one. Never been arrested for one, never been charged for one, never been convicted for one, never spent time in jail for one. He has 34 felonies. Convictions. Convictions. Meaning he broke the fucking law and was convicted for it. So how does that 1356 look now? How does it look now? I'm one of the 13% and I ain't got a felony. I've never been even arrested for one. Him has been arrested, fingerprinted, mugshotted, booked, released, bailed out, tried, adjudicated by a jury of his peers, found guilty. Does 1356 apply to that? Does it? Make no mistake about it. Y'all use 1356 as if it's a cudgel. You want so desperately to believe that every single black person is bad. I once saw a number from one of you dumbasses that said in the year of 2022, 400 million black babies were aborted. For that number to be anywhere close to correct, my mother, who had been dead for 2 years at that time, would have had to have had 2 children or 2 abortions. You see, this is why these conversations are bad for y'all. They are. Even a aware black person with a limited amount of education can destroy everything that you're saying. And I think that's the point. Y'all like saying this shit to each other. It's like sitting in an elevator and farting and smelling each other's farts. Just because you have it in your head does not make it true. Because like I just showed you, I don't have any felony arrest, any felony convictions, none of that. But the guy whose name is on that goddamn card that you have as a video on your page does. So what does that say about you? What does it say what does it say about people like you? Would you like for me to do it demographically the same way you just did, 1356? Okay. 65% of boomers have felony convictions. Since we just pulling numbers out of our ass, he is a boomer. He has felony convictions. 65% of white men commit rapes on people. He was found liable for defamation of character and grape. So should I attribute all that? Should I attribute his crimes to every boomer man, or 65% of them? Should I do, I don't know, 1365? Should I do that? 95% of older white people commit crimes. I'm basing it off of him. Isn't that what you do? Oh, you don't like it when that happens. Then maybe you shouldn't do it. I need you to understand this. Y'all can 1356 my dick in your mouth. 1356, these nuts. Just because you say it does not make it true. Just like supposedly 400 million black babies were aborted in 2022, which would have meant my mother would have had to have a couple of them. She was 84 when she left this earth. And we're not even going to touch the fact that you cannot be the majority in this country and not also be the majority of everything. Crime, yeah. Abuse of narcotics, yeah. Welfare recipients, yeah. Medicaid recipients, yeah. Food stamp users, yeah. Alcoholics, yeah. Baby mamas, yeah. Do you get it now? Do you get it? Is it clear to you? Maybe you shouldn't 1356 shit. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe in this regard, you should be an old white woman, tend your garden, love your husband or not, love your kids or not, love your grandkids or not, and stay out of conversations that are going to hurt your feelings. Because I'm not my ancestors. I am never going to play fair with you. I'm going to remind you that you are part of a demographic that has committed heinous acts like, I don't know, mass pews. And since I don't know when one of y'all is going to snap off with your arsenal and decide to take out an entire Dunkin' Donuts because you had a bad day or whatever, maybe I should attribute that to you too as well, huh? How about the crimes of Kyle Rittenhouse? Do you want those? Do you want them? Peyton Gendron, you want those crimes too? You know, he drove from Pennsylvania to Buffalo to go to a predominantly black neighborhood in a predominantly black supermarket, and 10 people are no longer on this planet because of him. How about Dylan Roof? You want some of his crimes too? I could go on. I won't even talk about the serial killers. Yeah, sit this one out. Sit it out. Because if you continue to trek on this grass, I'm going to break your heart. And I'm going to have a smile on my face as I do it.
I had to ask ChatGPT for a word or term that I could use for how I feel about everybody caring about the children in Gaza, the children, Mexican children, immigrants, and everybody else's children and people but my own. And the term that it came up with was moral or righteous resentment. I like empathy for other groups of people, and the reason that I say that is I don't have a choice but to, because empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. I don't have to put myself in your shoes. You're in my shoes. You understand? You're in my people's shoes. Sympathy requires for me to have a distance from your situation and be an outside observer and say, oh, I feel bad for you, but I don't have an emotional connection because I haven't been through that. I cannot have sympathy for other people because I cannot remove myself from proximity. My people go through that. So I'm not lacking in moral character. What I'm lacking in the ability to shovel out all of these emotions and feelings and activism for other people. When those same people commit atrocities towards my people and ignore my people's genocide unless it is to attach their own struggle onto my own people's. That is not evil. That is not morally wrong. The response to the treatment of my people. I am not required to have any type of emotional reaction to my oppressor's struggle. You cannot demand the oppressed to stand up for the oppressor. And no matter what situation people are in, the history is outlined and shows that all peoples have been a direct oppressor to my people and continue to be so, especially as Black Americans, especially in African countries. The countries that y'all stand up for that are other non-Black countries have been colonized by non-Black people. In some of these countries, they've damn near wiped out the ethnic genetic pool for Black people that were the original inhabitants because of slave trades. How can I have empathy when you have literally changed the DNA of my people, changed their ethnic makeup to where they are no longer Black in some circumstances, where they have even separated themselves from Blackness, and rightfully so, because they no longer share the phenotype of my people. And in that, turn those same people that used to be my people and should be my people into oppressors themselves, into racists themselves. Because if you have a slur for my people, whether you share my skin color or not, and some of my features or not, you are not of my people. Jarir, Abid, etc., you are not of my people. And that is really the entire precipice of how I feel about the entirety of situations not involving my people. Because here's the thing, if the Black issue had been solved, none of this would be occurring. People had given a damn and not been so focused on exploiting Black people over the past couple thousand years, we would not be in the situation we are in today. So do not tell me about your oppression, because when you are overly oppressed, so are Black people. We have already been through the situation. You lay heavier on top of us with every inch of your oppression. But even when you are not oppressed, it still lays heavy on us, because you will turn around and do the same exact thing as if you were still oppressed. You will still oppress us. That pretty much summarizes how I feel and why I talk the way that I do. If you want to call me prejudiced, that's fine. It does meet the definition. I do prejudge so that I can protect myself, my children, my people, sure. You can't call me xenophobic, because xenophobia is the unreasonable fear of a certain group of people, religion, ethnicity, all that. My fear is not unreasonable. You can call me racist if you want to. In fact, I would love the title. I wish I had the power to be racist. And those are my stances.
Wow, that was a heated debate there, because people are kind of taking their spaces. Blacks are coming up and they're regrouping, and people want to fight for justice, because for years Blacks have been taken advantage of, and everybody has been there to see. If you look at the racial group that has faced the harshest punishment and the harshest persecution and disenfranchisement from the white American elite, it is the Blacks. So that is why you find that Asians are highly likely to support Blacks, and any other minority group. If there is any issue, the likelihood of them supporting Blacks is considerably higher, except for those who think that the light skin that they have could make them more whiter than Black. But because of the 1% drop rule, it is evident that whites will consider you a Black person as long as you are either brown and not white like them. So why is it that these minority groups are highly likely to support Blacks? Many Asians and minority groups in America tend to empathize with and support Black Americans in their struggles because of shared experiences with racism and marginalization. Both groups have historically faced exclusion, violence, and discriminative policies such as segregation, internment, and immigration bans that shaped their socio-political consciousness. This creates a natural sense of solidarity, especially among younger generations of Asian Americans who are more likely to adopt intersectional views and see systemic racism as a common enemy. Movements like Black Lives Matter have inspired many Asian activists to reflect on their own histories and join in solidarity. Additionally, the increased dialogue around anti-Asian hate, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, has helped foster greater mutual understanding. Black activists have been vocal in condemning anti-Asian violence, which has not gone unnoticed. In return, many Asians recognize that justice for one marginalized group often reinforces justice for all. Educational institutions, community organizations, and social media platforms have played key roles in encouraging cross-racial allyship, focusing on coalition building rather than competition between minority groups. In contrast, support for white Americans, particularly in racial justice contexts, tend to be more conditional among Asians. While many Asians work, study, and live alongside white Americans and may share some class interests, they are often acutely aware of the privilege that whiteness carries in America. This awareness can limit emotional or political alignment, especially when white Americans are perceived to be resistant to acknowledging racial inequalities or are seen as benefiting from the very structures that disadvantage people of color. Asians are less likely to rally behind causes that center white identity or claim reverse racism, viewing such positions as undermining broader equality efforts. As such, this doesn't imply animosity. Many Asians do not support individual white Americans and collaborate across racial lines. However, in the realm of racial justice and systemic critique, they are far more likely to stand with the black communities due to shared interest in dismantling racial hierarchies. These alliances are not merely reactive, but increasingly proactive as both groups engage in mutual education and advocacy to challenge the racial status quo in America. That is it from us today. If you look at how minority groups tend to come together, the likelihood of Asians coming to support blacks when they have challenges, it's really high because the 1% blood rule is something that has always worked to discriminate Asians and even Latinos out of being considered as whites. When there are things that are supported by white privilege, those who are not considered white always don't benefit. And that is why if you look at the challenges and the issues that blacks and Asians and even other minority groups are facing in America, it is highly likely that these minority groups will coalesce together and work towards a better, united America. You can share with us your thoughts down in the comment section. And if you're watching us for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also join our membership where you get exclusive content tailored just for you. Thank you, and let's meet on the next one. Goodbye.